It would take around 2 months of no food for you to starve to death, but if you didn't have any water, you would die from dehydration in 3 to 5 days. Now, the general advice for staying hydrated is to drink around 6 to 8 glasses of fluid per day, but there's no way that hydration can actually be that simple. Turns out that when you sweat, you lose a lot more than just water, and if you try and rehydrate yourself with just water, you'll hinder your hydration by upsetting a delicate balance that exists within your body. Hello and welcome back. As always, I am Tom, and I have a fascination with longevity. So much so that I put videos like this together to answer questions that I find myself asking around my own health and fitness. And I must admit, I have never really understood what electrolytes are up until I started researching this video. I thought it was just sodium and potassium. But being that I've got my marathon coming up fairly soon, and given that I've done a lot of work on the proper nutrition and fueling, I thought it only right to focus on the hydration. Although admittedly I should have started this a hell of a lot earlier. As well as exploring how they should be used in and around my training, I'm also going to dive a little bit deeper into what they are and how they're used, with the goal of understanding whether I can better leverage them to perform at my best. So what is an electrolyte? An electrolyte is the medical term for an ion, which is a charged atom or element. And when we talk around them in this context, we're going to be referencing the big five. Sodium is involved in oxygen transport, making it critical for endurance exercise, and when combined with the second of our big five, chloride, they become very important for hydration. And this is because the positively charged sodium ion attracts the negatively charged oxygen ion, and the negatively charged chloride ion attracts the positively charged hydrogen ion. And this attraction creates very strong osmotic pressure. And this allows us to move water across cell membranes to other areas of the body that need it the most. And we call this regulating extracellular hydration. Similar to how sodium will draw water out of cells using osmotic pressure, potassium will draw water into cells to maintain the proper solute concentration levels. And we call this regulating intercellular hydration. When combined with sodium, this forms the sodium-potassium pump, and think of this as the battery for the body, making sure there is sufficient electrical charge within the cells that need it. This charge then goes on to power things like the nerve-muscle interaction to make sure that muscles contract properly. Similar to potassium, calcium's role is to help the nerves stimulate the muscle. And deficiencies in calcium could lead to someone losing their grip strength, or in more severe situations, it could lead to tetany or twitching due to too much neural excitability. And then finally, we have magnesium, whose main role is to relax the muscle. Now, magnesium and calcium work side by side throughout the entire day to help contract and relax the muscle, but magnesium is most necessary after long or intense exercise to completely allow the muscle to recover after intense periods of contraction. Now, magnesium is found at the core of chlorophyll, which is found in leafy greens, which explains why a lot of people on the Western diet are insufficient, prompting this need for supplementation. Now, aside from regulating muscle functions, magnesium is also critical for regulating the absorption of sodium and potassium. Now, in practice, there are many more than these five, but these five gain the spotlight because they are measured within standard blood tests, they are lost within sweat, which makes them very relevant for the topic of hydration, and they're also essential for bioelectricity. I played with a couple of different metaphors to explain how bioelectricity helps the body to perform various functions, and the one I've settled with is an orchestra. The brain is a dense network of neurons, each one firing their own electrical impulses. Think of these impulses like musical notes, with the brain being responsible for forming these into thoughts, movements, and emotions, much like a conductor. One of its most important roles is to communicate to the sodium-potassium pump, which we're going to label as the master tuner, the baseline voltages and concentrations for each electrolyte, so that the pump can maintain these optimum levels. And then think of each one of the big five as a different section of this orchestra: brass, wind, etc. To bring this to life, let's look at a couple of examples. When you touch a hot surface, sensory neurons fire alerts to your brain. Your brain then receives this and fires motor commands back via motor neurons to pull your hand away. Sodium initiates the signal, potassium resets the membrane, and calcium triggers the neurotransmitter release at synapses. Before this initial touch even occurs, the brain has communicated to the sodium-potassium pump the correct concentrations of all these electrolytes within these cells to make sure that if something like this did occur, then they'd all be able to fire correctly. Now, when the brain receives these impulses, or as we're thinking of them, musical notes, it's responsible for arranging these into beautiful music. One section of the orchestra, sodium, is already active, is already playing, and now it falls to the brain to call on the finely tuned sections of potassium and calcium to conduct a response that results in our hand being taken away. Note that if any of these cells are missing one of these three sections, then the music will sound out of tune and our hand won't be taken away. Now, when the response is complete, the concentrations of these electrolytes in these cells will be imbalanced due to the electrolytes being used to relay this message to the brain. And so now it's up to the sodium-potassium pump to reset those optimum baselines that the brain has previously communicated. Let's look at another example where the conductor is orchestrating the entire action. You're doing hill sprints. For this, you obviously need your quads to contract repeatedly, and so the conductor looks to the area of the orchestra in which calcium, potassium, and magnesium are playing. The master tuner has ensured that their instruments are finely tuned, and so the conductor begins sending motor impulses as he begins his conducting. Calcium is used to initiate the contraction, magnesium to relax the muscle, and then potassium is used to help restore resting potential. When complete, the conductor will shift his focus to another area of the body, while the magnesium, potassium, and calcium imbalances in your quads are now reset by the sodium-potassium pump, making sure they're finely tuned for the next time the conductor calls. Similar to how each part of the orchestra is key to creating beautiful and captivating music, electrolytes are critical for how they facilitate the bioelectrical processes that keep our body properly functioning. Obviously, we do have optimal levels for each of these big 5 electrolytes, measured as their concentration in the blood in millimoles per litre. Outside of regular blood testing, it is quite difficult to accurately and consistently track these, and so what I'd recommend is looking out for the different symptoms that can arise off the back of these imbalances, such as headaches, muscle cramps, or twitching. I've even put together this little table for you to show you how to interpret certain symptoms as signs of low or high levels of these electrolytes. Give that a pause if you want to. I won't be talking you through that. I'll lose 2 of the 3 viewers that have actually stuck with me to this point. And so we come to the first practical and most common application of electrolytes, which is their use within sports, and specifically workouts that are sweat heavy. And the reason why electrolytes are so important to consume post-sweaty workout is because sweat isn't just made up of water. It's rich in magnesium, chloride, sodium, and potassium, and so by rehydrating with just water, you'd just be diluting the remaining electrolytes you already have and worsening the imbalances, which could lead to muscle cramps, being that you now have insufficient levels of potassium and magnesium, which, as we've learned previously, are crucial for stimulating muscle contraction and relaxation. Fatigue and brain fog due to electrolytes' role in transporting oxygen and regulating blood pressure. Low levels, such as when you've been sweating excessively, can lead to mental fatigue and sluggish recovery. Elevated heart rates due to dehydration reducing our blood volume, which forces our heart to work even harder. And the way in which you'll notice this is you might think that your workout was harder than it should have been. If we look at the longer term effects, these are definitely more applicable for those that train more intensely or have regular training blocks, and they really just build on the short term effects that we've just covered. For example, if we consider the long-term impact of electrolyte imbalances on the muscle, not only will we see persistent cramps, spasms, and weaknesses, but we also run the risk of this sustained oxidative stress reducing our mitochondrial efficiency, which will impair our total endurance and power output. Or if we think about the short-term effects that electrolyte imbalances can have on our blood pressure, if this continues to the long term, we run the risk of developing chronic low blood pressure and kidney dysfunction. Long story short, it's definitely not worth the risk, and that's why I went to ChatGPT to ask around electrolyte timing around your workout as a whole. Before that workout, we want to focus on priming our fluid balance and preventing early fatigue, and that's actually why we want to start with some electrolytes around 1 to 2 hours before our workout. Around 500 milliliters of water with an electrolyte tablet or powder will work just fine. Ideally, we want to focus on getting sodium, potassium, and magnesium due to the role they play in facilitating muscle stimulation. If our exercise is over 60 minutes or is particularly sweat heavy, we want to be focusing on preventing cramps, maintaining hydration, and probably most importantly, maintaining that nerve-muscle connection. So a glucose electrolyte gel is going to be my go-to here, around 6 to 8%. In a previous video, I broke down glucose's role in proper fueling for sustained or intense exercise, but it plays a major role in hydration as well. When consumed as part of an electrolyte solution, it will be absorbed alongside sodium. And at some point in the small intestine, the two of these will bind together, forming a co-transporter. And when these molecules pass through the cell membrane and are fully absorbed by the body, they create a very strong osmotic gradient that will pull even more water from the gut into the bloodstream than sodium would be able to do so alone. So in short, it supercharges water absorption. Anyway, back to our plan. Post-workout, we are going to want to focus on reducing soreness, promoting recovery, and replenishing losses. And so we're going to go back to some electrolytes again. Now, if you want to get very scientific and particular about this, you can weigh yourself before and after your workout and consume 500 milliliters of electrolytes for every pound of weight lost. Whatever your choice, you need to avoid just plain water, as this will just dilute the remaining electrolytes you have and sustain the imbalances that you've got. Similar to when we're awake, the orchestra is still playing music while we're asleep. The difference being that the master tuner is redistributing these electrons for different reasons, as the conductor has a different sheet of music. This sheet is instructing the redistribution to support muscle recovery and tissue regeneration, but also to influence the release of cortisol, melatonin, and growth hormone, all of which are critical for our sleep architecture. The reason I bring this up is because by the time we've woken, we will have used these electrolytes to support recovery and will now be functioning with imbalances. These imbalances are made even worse by the fact that we do still sweat overnight, even in cold environments, which, as we've learned, is not just water. Therefore, the best way to start your day is going to be with electrolytes, as we now need sodium and potassium to help rehydrate cells, and magnesium to help calm the nervous system. If you are a coffee drinker in the morning, hopefully not too early, then electrolytes will also help to buffer the diuretic effects that caffeine has to help us retain even more fluids. And when I say electrolytes, it doesn't have to be some synthetic powder or tablet. You can of course make this yourself. I've seen people start the day with some salt and a glass of water, and if you're going down this route, just make sure you're getting the magnesium and potassium as well. Personally, I'm going to stick with my electrolyte tablets as they taste a hell of a lot better than just salty water. A couple of other times you might want to take electrolytes throughout the day is number one, to support deep work, with magnesium and potassium helping stabilize brain signaling. And then secondly, if it is a hot day and you're passively sweating, reach for a glass of those electrolytes in place of a glass of water. I'm actually going to save the discussion on which electrolyte solution is best for another video, as I imagine that's going to involve a lot more deep diving into chemicals and compounds, and I really want to give that the focus it deserves. So it turns out that hydration is so much more than just drinking more water, and I am definitely going to work more metaphors into my videos in the future, as it really helped me untangle what bioelectricity is. This research has definitely helped me understand how I can be using electrolytes to support my exercise, and I'm definitely going to fast track that next video on choosing the best electrolytes, just so I can understand where to look to gain that full benefit. As always, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time.